I'm attorney Ryan, and this is Working Class. I'm very excited for this episode because we're talking to Laura Whaley. She's a good friend of mine. We met a few months ago at a conference, and I absolutely loved some of the insights she had about setting healthy boundaries at work, dealing with mental health and depression, and how to build a successful career. She has amazing advice for us on this episode, and you can find her on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, where she has accumulated millions of followers with her lifestyle advice and how to professionally say some tough things to your boss. Come along, let's have a talk. Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming here. First things first, we have a little gift for you. Just a little welcome thing. Yeah.
Do you want me to open it?
Yeah, open it up. Okay. Open it up. No.
You never know when people give you a gift like here and you're like, do you want to watch me open it?
No.
I love homemade cards, so this is beautiful. How do you professionally say with Work Bestie? Funny enough, I just posted one of those this morning.
I saw it. Thank you for that. Our legal assistant, Trish, she's super lovely, and her little thing is making these custom handmade cards for people. I got one after their wedding, and she made this for you. We're really stoked that you're here. So welcome to San Diego.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a lot colder here than I anticipated. Other than that, it's beautiful.
Colder than I anticipated, too. It looks like last month we didn't have a single clear sunny day in San Diego. I don't know what the hell is happening, but is this your first time here?
Yes, not in California, but in San Diego it is.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
What do you think of the city so far?
I've seen very little of it, but it's very nice down by the water there.
You're in the marina, right?
I am.
Did you get to do like a mental health walk around the bay today?
I was so tired yesterday.
Really?
Oh, today? No, I didn't. That's on my agenda for this afternoon.
Awesome.
Do a little walk around. I just sat on my balcony there and looked out and people watched. And
yeah, we're really lucky. You can do that walk around the bay, and especially like when the golden hour comes and it's like sunset in San Diego. We used to have those around here. Not so much lately. It's absolutely stunning. And after the show today, we're going to go to one of my favorite places. We're going to go to Costera. It's a Mexican restaurant right on the water. You're going to have a great time.
I can't wait.
I love it. So Laura, the reason I wanted to bring you in today is you're the Work Bestie. You are the expert on dealing with difficult people, workplace boundaries. I think a good way to start for people who aren't familiar with you is let's talk a little bit about your work. So how do we professionally say that you're the Work Bestie? What is it you do? How would you describe it? Yeah.
So my content online, I think I started with the idea of kind of being that virtual work bestie that kind of marries up work conversations, but in a very, human way, relatable way. So my content focuses on trying to have engaging, humorous, entertaining content, but also have underlying themes or messages. And that's really kind of what has happened over time. We have the How to Professionally Say series. We've got boundary setting. We've got a whole series of characters that we have coming into play. So it's a little bit of everything, but mainly focused around that relatable work.
Yeah, I like that you have different channels. You have your boundary setting and how do you professionally say, because I think especially us who are Gen Z and millennials kind of figuring out how to navigate corporate culture, we deal with a lot of just unhinged human behavior on a daily basis. And you're like, okay, I want to tell this person fuck around and find out. But how do I professionally say that to a human being? And you've done a good job. I wonder how many jobs you might have saved. One thing I notice about your content is it's almost always characters in a Zoom meeting. Is there a reason for that?
Honestly, it's easier to film virtual kind of settings with all the character swaps, just having the laptop. But also the last couple of years with everyone getting sent from home, remote work has been a lot of people's reality. And I think over time we'll see, people shifting back to the office, but remote work I think is here to stay long term. So just kind of kept with that. Yeah,
I think it is here to stay. It's wild how hard companies are fighting it. It's one of those things that to me feels inevitable. I don't know if you feel the same way. What is the point of us going into an office for meetings that can be done over Zoom? The extra cost, the commute, but companies are pushing back. I mean, do you think there's going to be a point where office workers just have to give in to what companies say? You have to be in the office?
I think there's value in being in the office, and I think there's value in working remote. And I think that it kind of depends on where you're at with your career, because I think especially when you're starting out in a career or if you're working in a new field, it's actually fantastic to be in the office for the things you miss out on home. And, people having water cooler talks and just kind of overhearing, learning different parts of the business. You gain a lot of communication skills or just effective, skills to have in meetings that you don't really get as much remotely. But then remotely, you get a ton of other skills when it comes to, digital communication. And so I think there's a balance, and I get from an employer side why they would want to bring people back to an office when it comes to more, monitoring productivity and that really culture building, that team building. But then I also understand from an employee's perspective why working remote is very, very valuable, especially for people who value that autonomy, that flexibility. But it's not really a one size fits all. And so I don't think that there's going to be a lot of success from companies if they're very one way or the other. They've got to kind of find that middle ground that works for a lot of people. Otherwise, if you're sending everyone back to the office, you're missing out on an amazing pool of employees that are just remote workers. Or alternatively, if you're saying, remote only, then you're going to miss out on a whole pool of people who want that in-person kind of work dynamic.
Yeah. I'm really glad you bring that up because it's not one size fits all. My firm is 90% remote, but we do in-person meetings. We have like a round robin, if you will, where people come in and spend a half day in the office with me just to kind of reestablish that relationship. So who is remote work really for? I mean, everyone seems to want it. Everyone is looking at the job boards and saying, I want to work remotely. I can send emails from my couch. I want to be with my dog. I don't want to commute. But are there people out there where, in-office work is really better?
Remote work sounds very glamorous. Like everything you just said, it sounds nice. And it is. For some people, it works really well, depending, especially what season of life you're in. Remote work can also be very lonely, can be very isolating. You could spend, your entire week really not having any face-to-face communication. And for some people, that doesn't work. Also, remote work doesn't work in every home. Not everyone has the luxury of having a specific space in their home that is dedicated to work. Not everyone has a quiet home. Some people like to get out of their home. And so I think, it's easy to make working remote look very glamorous, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. Yeah. And working in an office can also, be just or sound just as glamorous, but that also doesn't work for a lot of people. So again, it's not kind of a one size fits all, and it's not something that I think should be overly glamorized until you kind of try it yourself and see like, yeah, okay, I get, pros and cons working from home.
Yeah. You brought up a couple interesting points there. The first being not everyone has the luxury of, hey, here's a nice clean space with an internet connection and it's quiet and you can do your calls, you can do your work, you have a computer. So is there any sort of elitism to this work from home movement? Do you think it leaves certain people out?
I think absolutely that does come into play with it. Your accessibility to things, like you said, having a laptop. Not everyone is supplied a company laptop, and not everyone would have something like that at home or just the space to it. So I think there's a lot that goes into the work from home accessibility. Yeah,
I believe you. So it seems like, the answer is, well, the office can be a great equalizer for a lot of people, whether you live in a studio apartment with roommates, you're just starting out your career, maybe it's your first job out of college. The office, it can be a safe space for you.
It's controlled.
It's a controlled environment where you can do your work and work on your career. And then as, hopefully you move up and your earnings go up, you can have more control over your space. But does that mean that the in-office movement, does it kind of skew in favor of high earners and higher educated people? Is it creating an imbalance?
Imbalance is in like what kind of experience you get working wise if you're remote like versus in person. Who gets
that flexibility and who doesn't?
It's tough to say. It depends on the company.
It really does.
Really. And not so much just even the company. Like I've seen workforces where the company has one idea, but it also depends on your leader, who your manager is, your department, even what the leader in your department is kind of fighting for within the company. So yeah, I don't know necessarily if office versus work from home is favoring a specific group, because I think it's so company, so manager specific.
No, it's absolutely true. I made a video about work from home yesterday. I was a little upset at Salesforce because they have a new incentive program. Oh, you saw that? Yeah, a lot of people did. Yeah. And it turned out to be extremely polarizing. And for some of the reasons that I brought up today, do you know what was going on with Salesforce, their charity incentive program?
Not too much.
Okay. So for those who don't know, I thought this was pretty sneaky and I'd like to know your opinion about it. So Salesforce had a great idea. They thought, well, we've got these big offices in San Francisco. No one's coming. We got to motivate people to get in here. So they set aside a charity fund and they said, listen, every day you come into this office, we're going to donate $10 to a local charity, up to $2.5 million. That was their incentive program that they offered people. At first, it sounds nice.
And I'm like waiting for the fine print.
I really don't like this because here's my problem. They set aside $2.5 million. They said, this is $2.5 million that goes to charity if everyone comes into the office. So really every day someone doesn't show up, the company is saying, hey, Laura, you didn't come to the office today. So we're taking $10 out of that charity fund. It feels kind of manipulative to me. These are the kind of heavy-handed tactics I'm seeing employers do to try to force people into the office. And they feel manipulative. They feel aggressive. I mean, what's your take on employers just trying so hard to force people in there?
It sounds creative. I think that employers, they have to get creative though, if they're really trying, because you have to convince people to come back to the office. It's like, what's the pro you're getting from that versus working at home? Why would I take that meeting from an office if I can just take it from home? There needs to be some sort of incentive or motivator there to bring people back if that's the goal of the company. So I think companies are just starting to get creative and seeing what's working and throwing things out there. I think all of this is so new. The last couple of years have been so many new, things have been incorporated into our working normals. And I think we're going to see over the next little bit as things transition potentially back to the office, companies getting quite creative. And so I don't necessarily think it's manipulative. I think that it is incentivizing coming back to the office. And I think I would prefer a tactic like that versus a forced, come back every Monday, Tuesday, or you're fired. It still leaves the employees to have a say in it and to choose. I don't necessarily know how effective that tactic is going to be. And it will be interesting to see kind of how it plays out over time. But I think that's just an example of employers getting creative, like they're going to have to be.
That's interesting. I personally hated the plan. The idea that, hey, here's $10 we're going to give to charity unless you come into the office. If you don't come in, we're not donating it. I didn't like that so much, but I also see where you're coming from with the, hey, if it's every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't know, it gives some predictability. So what are some incentives to get back into the office that you think employers should be doing? What is a good incentive to get in there?
A good workspace. Like I always think about it, is that kind of incentive. I think it's not, because it's like a take it or leave it. The actual place that you're going to doesn't change. But I would say if you're investing in a good office workspace that you actually want to go to, something that's inspires creativity, collaboration, maybe, you want to see your coworkers and go in, I think focusing on just making it a really good space to want to come into should be the incentive enough versus having to add on all these other things. Because to me, it just goes, well, I know people don't want to come into the office. So yeah, how can we force you to come into a space that you don't already want to come into? And you're not going to have an enjoyable experience if you don't already like that environment. So it's not sustainable over time.
Yeah.
So I would just think, create a space that your employees actually want to go to.
You bring up an interesting point because I feel like we're talking so much about, okay, what's going to get them into the office? Do we do the charity thing? Do we do a set schedule? Do we have coffee on Tuesdays? Like, at the end of the day, I think employers are asking the wrong question. They're not asking themselves, why do people not want to come here in the first place?
Yeah.
Create a place that they want to come to. And the reasons people don't want to come in, I mean, gosh, they're so quick to say, oh, people are lazy. No one wants to work anymore. But those aren't the real reasons people don't want to go into an office. What do you think some of those reasons are?
The value of working from home for a lot of people, whether that's it's the impact, really what it is the impact to their personal life is the value you get there from staying home, whether that's the flexibility to be able to, pick up your kids from school at the end of the day, or to be able to be home for your dogs, or if you have, delivery scheduled, or that flexibility is priceless. And I think that that's actually, almost added into a compensation package on these days, because that's such a value in a job if it works for you. Yeah. And then I think, the going into the office piece, there's got to be something that says, okay, these employees I know that they really enjoy working from home for whatever reason. Like you said, you can't control that because it's going to be so different for every employee that you have. But on those days where maybe they don't have anything going on, or they can spare a little time, what's going to direct them back to the office than just staying home?
It sounds like there's this either or, like either you pick up your kids from school or you work in this office. There's this choice where people are being forced to sort of sacrifice something really meaningful to them in their personal life to be in the office. Is that kind of the primary struggle you see?
Yeah, but it's also, it doesn't need to be like that, because are we saying come back to the office 8 hours a day, or are we saying we want people back to the office when it works with their schedule? So in that parent example, it's maybe you can drop the kids off at school. You're in the office from 10 to 2. I don't know when kids get out of school, but let's just say that's like a good window. And then, you are able to leave and pick up your children and then go back and finish the rest of your working hours. Like, why is that flexibility not offered in? Why is it just Mondays in the office, Tuesdays you're at home? Why is it not okay? Whenever you can come to the office, if you'd like to come to the office, come to the office. And if that means 4 of your 8 hours in a working day, great. If it means 8, great.
Man, there's some managers that are just losing their mind hearing this, saying, wait, I want my full 8 hours. You're telling people they can come in for 4, go pick up their kid and come back. You actually made a really good video. I was watching it on the Stair Climber yesterday, and it was an employee wanted to go have a medical appointment. Do you remember this skit that you made? She just wanted a doc, which, I mean, your health is everything. Without health, you don't have anything. You don't have an employee. You don't have a life. All you want to do is go see the doctor. And the character was so apologetic to her boss, offering to make up the lost time. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to make that skit? Because we have all been there. I remember just being a law clerk in law school, and God forbid I had a final exam that day, a final exam. And I'd go to my supervising attorney and ask for the time off. And I'd be like, oh God, is he going to hate me? Am I going to ruin my career? Am I going to burn a bridge? Is he going to think I'm not commit, which is so stupid. It's a final. So what inspired you to make that clip?
I, early on in my career, I had the same kind of idea of like, I had to make up every minute if I was off, but especially when it comes to appointments, like their working hours are also your working hours. So it's so hard to schedule things outside of that. And it's something that I experienced myself, and I see a bunch of people experience, of just setting aside important things within your life, for your work, and to not have to miss out on even a minute, and kind of going minute by minute of this exchange between employer and employee, even though a lot of times you end up working a little bit later here, or, working extra hours here. Just,
it really balances out, doesn't it?
It really does. And so at one point in my career, I had a manager who kind of sat me down and explained to me, it all will even out over time, as long as you're not abusing it. And we kind of have open communication here. And you're also cognizant of, you have an appointment at this time, so you're not scheduling a ton of meetings and really shifting things around, but it all evens out over time. Like, you need to take care of yourself. And then it comes back to the conversation that we were just having about the flexibility and autonomy over your own schedule, and how when you have a good management system in place, good leadership that allows you to make up your own working life and trust that you're going to get everything done, and you're still meeting all your goals, but it doesn't mean, clock in at 9 a.m. and clock out at 5 and it has to stay exactly like that. I think there's so much power in that in a job.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I like about flexible work and remote work. Like, I love that, Sam is one of our executive assistants here. If she needs to go to a doctor, just shoot me a text. Like, hey, I'm going to be at the doctor. It should be about an hour. Cool. Go do it. Instead of being held captive in a cubicle of all places. I remember I had a cubicle job some time ago, and I remember having that problem. I'd be like, I need to go see a doctor. I don't feel good. I need to go see a doctor, or my tooth hurts. I need to go see a dentist, but I'm out of PTO. I'm out of sick time. My manager isn't responding to my request to at the time. And it's so stupid. Yeah. Because we should be looking out for our health. And if you're an employer, you should be looking out for the health of your employees. Yeah. I think more flexible work is the way. I don't know how we're going to do that, because it seems that our whole society in general is not built around a 9 to 5. And I know that sounds crazy. You want to make an appointment with the dentist. When's the dentist open? 9 to 5. Yeah. You want to pick up your kid from school. When does school get out? I'm not sure either, but I know it's not 5 o'clock. I can't believe we haven't figured that out yet. Yeah. So I'm glad you're making those videos and helping people try to set those boundaries. What kind of comments are you getting from people on these videos? Because I know there's probably at least 2 kinds of people based on my experience. There's the people who really love it. Oh my gosh, thank you. I used this language with my boss and it was wonderful. Yeah. And then you have the other kind of person who says, you're out of touch, you're stupid, you've clearly never worked in an office, you don't know. So what kind of reactions are you getting?
Well, we have a lot of outdated, like you said, practices within, the typical workforce. And I think when you challenge that or you offer an alternative to it, a lot of people who that's the only way they've ever known and they really believe in that structure of things, they go, hold up, no. And then they come up with the excuses of, well, you're a millennial, you're Gen Z, you're lazy, you don't want to work. I was in an article, I was featured in an article about, it was funny to read, but it was basically blaming not just me, but people who would think similar to me as the downfall of productivity in, I think it was the UK.
I think Martha Stewart said yesterday, was it yesterday? Martha Stewart said that America's going to go down the drain if we don't go back to the office.
It's interesting
Did you see that article?
Yeah.
Try to find that if you can. I thought this was interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting how it's so black and white for some people. It's like, well, if you do this, you fail. And if you do this, you're lazy. And it's like, well, there's so much more to that than people kind of, lead on. And I think it's going back to the kinds of comments that I get. You have those people who are very open to it, people willing to challenge the norms of the workforce. Then you have the people who are like, no, you're never going to make it. You're never going to be successful. You're never going to get a raise. And I'm like, my life has proven you wrong.
But why the anger? Why do they get so angry when we say, hey, it's okay to
change?
Yeah, it's okay. Why is Martha Stewart so upset about it? I think it was Martha Stewart, back to the office. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. No. This is a judgment-free place. This is an open work environment. All right. Martha Stewart said, this is from CNN Business. Can you scroll up there, Drew? Yeah. All right. Martha Stewart says, America will go down the drain if people don't return to the office. Drew, scroll down a little bit. Laura, do we agree with that statement?
No,
you're a Canadian. I don't even know if you're an interested party to this.
I don't agree with that mentality. And I can also appreciate that change is really difficult for a lot of people. And for someone who, for the majority of their career, they've seen things done a certain way and it's lived up to their definition of success. Once that changes and we start to see things shifting and maybe your definition of success isn't necessarily aligned with a lot of people's anymore. Yeah. You go back to well, this worked for me for so many years. And so if we're not doing this, we're going to fail. And you even see that at workplace. It's like, well, we've done this for 30 years. And it's like, okay, well, what if we do something different now?
Yeah, it sounds like from what you're saying and what from Martha Stewart said, congrats on the Sports Illustrated, by the way. Good for her. This is a woman who built her career working a very unusual career. She didn't go into an office and work 9 to 5. She didn't work in a cubicle for 30 years. She was a TV personality. She was an entrepreneur. Now she's back to being an influencer, trying modeling. Good for her. But this is a very non-traditional career choice that she's chosen. So why do you think she's digging in and saying, no, everyone else needs to be traditional?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. I bet you there's a lot more layers to, obviously what you see in the news for that kind of things. And I'll bet you there's probably a reason why that's all coming out. I don't know too much about that. Don't know too much about the article. But I've seen that, and not just Martha Stewart. I mean, nothing against her, but it's so many people have come out with statements similar to it that, it's back to the office or everything's crumbling. And I just think that there's a lot of pushback to change. And I think that the pandemic's really just, rapidly, we've got to a place we were always inevitably going to get to in terms of the working remote kind of dynamic. And now that it's here, I think it's scaring a lot of people because it's not how they're used to operating business. They're not used to what they've seen. And so it puts the question in people's mind of, well, if I've done this for so many years and it was working and I know how to do it, it's familiar. And now we're saying the whole landscape of work is changing. How the heck do I fit into that new picture? That's a lot of change for me. Am I going to get, booted out? There's so much fear comes when change comes around. And I think we're seeing that within a lot of articles. It's like, well, things aren't going well, so let's blame this thing.
Yeah. It's funny that last bit you said, and I noticed on the article, Martha was lamenting apparently America's decline. I know that's something making a lot of headlines today. Do you think things are going badly generally?
In what way?
Like in work and society, because a lot of the pushback that I see is people saying, oh, America's going to go down the drain. This generation is losing everything. I mean, do you feel like there's a loss in the transition from the older generation to the millennials and Gen Zs taking up the workforce? I mean, is there a decline?
Potentially, but we have to look at it more on like a specifics level. So are we talking about decline in profits for a company? Are we talking about a decline in morale?
Definitely not profits in the company.
So when I hear you say that, I'm like, well, okay, we've also gained so much in people's lives. I think the last couple of years, a lot of people have gained back a lot of their personal life and have started to redefine sort of how career fits within their life and got a lot of power back. So I don't necessarily think things are declining. I think we've opened a whole other door for gains. But when, reading all these articles or just seeing them come out, it's like, we got to get more specific. What's going downhill? And does that tie back to your definition of success? And then what is that definition? Because I might have a very different one. Because right now I'm like, I think we're on a trajectory for a lot of success and a lot of gain. But my version of success is probably significantly different than some people's opinions in these articles. So
that's a really good point. And I wanted to see what you thought about hustle culture, because I think that's, if anything's on the decline, I think that's what it might be. But before we get into that, you were talking about definition of success and how it's different for people. And you know the question that's coming. I mean, Laura, do you have a definition of success? What does it mean to you?
I don't think I have, I think a definition of success comes with whatever season of life you're in at the moment. So right now in this season of life, and if you ask me this question in a year, it's probably different. But right now, success for me looks like having sustainable income to be able to live my own life, but also enough time and space to be able to dive into passions, to really focus on building a family. That to me is success, to be able to balance that work and passion with growing and developing myself, my relationships. And that's kind of where success lies for me at the moment.
I think that's a great definition. It sounds like there was 2 steps to that plan. The first step was making sure there was at least a minimum level of financial security. Yeah. Is that a fairly recent thing for you?
I have been fortunate to always been privileged in a perspective where I have always had, money coming in. I never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from.
Basic needs like rent and food were covered.
They were always met. And I'm fortunate that I have a family that I know would help me in any situation if I needed it. So that has always been something that fortunately I've never had to face a direct difficulty with income or finances. And so now that I'm, completely financially dependent aside from my family, which I've been for a long time, it's more, am I financially in a place that aligns with my financial goals? So is my income enough to cover basic needs, but also cover the goals that I'm working on my personal life financially? That's kind of what I mean by that piece.
That's great, because I think that's what a lot of us are working for, is we're trying to figure out, okay, look, I don't want to just work every day. My dream isn't to just work all day, every day. I mean, I know we glorify hard work and effort, and you should, there's a benefit to it. But at the end of the day, we all want the space to create a family, to create social, meaningful relationships outside of work, to achieve our dreams, build things. But it seems that it's really hard to do that without hitting a couple of necessary steps first. And it sounds like step 1 is you got to get your finances at least to a minimum level. And that might be different for different people. Living in San Diego, it's going to be very different than it might be for someone in, I don't know, rural Texas. The cost of living will be different. But there's a second part of that equation, and it's actually creating the space to build things. So I want to talk about your trajectory, because sitting here today, I'm looking at one of the most successful content producers I know and a serial entrepreneur. I mean, you're absolutely killing it. So let's go to the very beginning, Laura. Do you remember your first job?
Like first job?
First job. First time someone paid you to do some work.
It was probably babysitting.
Oh my gosh.
I wasn't great at it.
How old were you?
12.
People leave children with 12-year-olds.
I know. I was young, maybe. Yeah. And then I had a job for 14. Like I worked like young. young. I've always had a job. And that was one thing I always adored about my parents was even though they raised us in a very good household, but a household that we were going to understand the value of a dollar and we were going to work for it and we were going to contribute. And so we had a job from the moment we could get when I worked at a grocery store. I think that was my like first like real like
bagging, or what were you doing there?
Cashier.
You were a cashier?
I was, yeah. Yeah. And then a tanning salon.
Really? Where was all this happening? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in just west of Toronto in a town called Oakville. I'm Canadian. A lot of people don't know that about me. I'm Canadian, yes.
Yeah, I think you're very relaxed and happy, which is how I perceive Canadians. You know, they're kind of our more relaxed neighbor to the north. Just curious, Canadians looking down south, what's the average Canadian perspective of the average American?
Depends where the American's from, I think.
Let's start with California. Since we've got, I think, 5 or 6 of them in here.
That's a tough one. I think I have a lot of American friends, and I think that there's just a lot of people like to group Canadians and Americans together, which I always find so fascinating because there's like massive fundamental differences between the countries in terms of our laws, in terms of healthcare, in terms of, you know, our gun laws, which is always a big one that comes up.
I know. It's funny because Canada and America both have this historic like frontier culture. You know, we were the colonies, we were this unknown world for centuries, but we've evolved so differently. Am I out of line to say Canada is really more European than America is?
Canada is, at least, you know, the Toronto area, we are such a melting pot. I love that part of growing up in Canada because you have people from all different cultures, all different parts of the world. And that was just the normal from day one. And so we have great food, like any kind of food you want, we have the best because we get the most authentic.
All right, I'm going to take you up on it. When I go to Toronto, what do I need to get first?
Oh my God, whatever kind of food you want, you could get in Toronto. It's amazing.
Can I get Mexican?
Anything you want.
All right. Well, you're going to have a San Diego taco tonight and we're going to make some decisions. But yeah, what I'd like to know, since you're this work culture influencer, I mean, is there something Americans can learn from Canadians?
That's a big question. I think fundamentally, like a lot of the fundamental differences play into the working cultures. So for something like healthcare, for example, we have healthcare in Canada, which I know isn't a thing in the United States.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Right.
That's a big problem because we can absolutely afford it here. And we don't do it.
Yes, I've heard so many different discussions on that. It's a very heated topic, but when you think about something like that, and then you think about how it applies to work, well, our benefits packages for healthcare at work cover that. We do have them, and they cover a handful of things that aren't, you know, government funded, but that wouldn't be as effective, or not as effective, but there would be differences between like an American healthcare work plan because you need that to cover just basic healthcare. So there's fundamental differences, I think, in the cultures that play into the workforce. And I think that we do share also a lot of similarities in the working culture in terms of the overworked.
What do you think some of those similarities are? You said overworked?
I think that we talk about a 40-hour work week, and I think the reality for a lot of people is it's 40+ hour work week, and there's not that like definite cutoff time, and the expectation is you work when you're needed. You need to work. The
being on call 24/7
for a 40-hour.
We talked about drawbacks of remote work, and I think that's absolutely one of them. Absolutely one of them. Because you know, when you work remotely, there's no distinction between your workspace and your home space. And even if you have the office with technology now, employers are not shy about emailing or texting you at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
But they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be shy?
They shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be shy about that?
Who cares?
So what do you think?
That's on you.
That's on the employee who gets the text.
That is on the employee.
Hot take alert. Here we go. So why is it on the employee? If the manager is the one with the power who's reaching out and putting pressure on them to do their job, why is the responsibility with the employee to assert that?
Why do they have all the power?
Say more about that.
So the way I see it is we can't say, you know, employee A, B, C, D, all these employees, they're the exact same. They're going to work 9 to 5. That's when they're going to be the most productive. And what about, like, I know people that they get their best work done from like 9 p.m. till midnight. And that's where they're sending all their emails. And that's fine. And I think a lot of the remote work is taking the power and figuring out what works for you in your workday. So if someone's emailing me at 9 p.m., great. Why am I checking that email if those aren't my working hours? I'm not going to respond in that time anyway. So that's on me to set that boundary with myself to say, I start my workday at 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who emails me after 6 p.m. the night before. It's getting done at 8 a.m. And the more that you stick to that boundary, you know that if you email me at 11 p.m., I'm not responding till the next morning. But you do what works for you, and then I'll do what works for me.
Now the phone goes off. You're at home. You're doing your thing, and you hear the Outlook charm on your phone. I always get a little when I hear it. I've turned my phone on silent for that reason. But you hear it, and the employee is thinking, "Oh my gosh, what if it's really important?" What do you say? Let's say you're in the kitchen with this person. That phone went off at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. Coach me.
I don't have work email on my phone.
No work email on the phone. What if I miss something important? What if my boss gets mad?
Define important, because my experience has always been, if it's urgent, which let's be honest, there's very few things that are.
Probably.
If something is terribly happening that like it truly is urgent, which is rare, my manager knows, or the manager at the time knew that I could be called on a specific number only in an absolute emergency. And that was never to be, taken for granted and abused. And I can count on one hand how many times that happened.
Was it a real emergency?
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny we talk about this, and I always get, everyone wants to put the what if scenarios in the comments, and I'm sure we'll see them here. People are saying, well, good luck in the military. Well, military things tend to be a little life or death. Well, good luck in the fire department. Yes, if you're a firefighter, you should absolutely answer that call. Like, are you crazy? But if you just work in a law office and someone's saying, hey, what happened to that memo I wanted? That can wait to the next morning. No one's going to get hurt. But there is a lot of fear there. And there are some managers who get pretty upset and maybe feel entitled to the time. So I want to go back to you being a cashier for a minute, because I remember my first job. And I don't think there was ever a point in my life where I was more powerless, less sure of myself, less experienced, just didn't really, it's a scary world out there. Do you feel like you were able to set boundaries back when you were a cashier working in a grocery store? Were you able to kind of look out for yourself in a meaningful way?
I didn't even know what a boundary was.
Really?
Back then. Oh gosh, no. But also that job in itself kind of gave you a boundary of you clock in at 3, you clock in at 6, and no one's calling you out.
That was the basics.
Yeah. I mean, I was also 14. So for me, work was just a paycheck. Really. I mean, essentially that's what it is these days too. There's a bit more to that, but that's why I showed up. I checked people's groceries out 3 to 6, and I got a paycheck, and that was it. I didn't care any more beyond that because it was just a job. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think it's setting this, hey, this is my workspace. I come in during these times and I come out. And I think it does build that for you, even though, being an entry level cashier at a grocery store, you don't have a lot of power in that situation, but you do have the power to say, hey, here's my schedule and I respect it. Do you remember what you were being paid at the time?
Whatever minimum wage was.
Does Canada have a minimum wage right now?
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't know what it is at the moment. Maybe 14, 15 at the time. Maybe let's call it 10. It was $10 maybe.
Okay. What did you do after you were a cashier at the grocery store? What was the next move?
Tanning salon. I'm pretty sure it was close to my house. Yeah.
Free samples for employees.
Free tans.
I guess it does well in Canada.
Yeah. I think that was my next job. Now that I think about it. Yeah.
It's funny because, we're talking about, kind of floating from one place to another. And these are entry level retail. And there's a lot of people listening and a lot of people who follow me who are frustrated because they, we all need a job, and you get that first job. I worked at a gym for a period of time. I was selling gym. There we go. Selling gym memberships. It's such a joke, by the way, just a little tangent. People come into the gym and I was supposed to walk around with a clipboard and be like, so what are your goals? Well, this is the elliptical and it's great for meeting that goal. And here's the bench press and it's great for meeting your goals. Like they had a whole script that we had to follow. And everyone was just like, just give me the membership. Yeah. I'm like, I have to do the clipboard or I get in a lot of trouble. Yeah. I have to do this. Yeah. But yeah, the frustration I see from my followers is they get in that entry level role and they can't get out.
Yeah.
They work at this grocery store for a couple of years and this isn't working. I'm not making any good money. They go to the nail salon, tanning salon. This isn't working. And then they end up in another grocery store. Do you think that there's any risk of people getting caught in that entry level cycle? Is there a way to break out of it?
Apply for everything and anything, even if you don't think you're qualified.
What that's a great thing you're bringing up. What if I'm not qualified? I've done nothing but work in 7-Elevens my whole life. And you're telling me to apply to an office job?
Yeah. And you write on that resume all the skills that you gained from working at that 7-Eleven job, and you make them sound damn good, because I guarantee a lot of the skills that you're building, that soft skills, that especially retail jobs, are very applicable in a lot of other jobs. It's just phrasing it in a way that is attractive within a resume, and then apply. Oh my gosh, the things I've applied for that I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to get something like this. Or even the job I'm in now, and every job I take on, it's like, wow, I would have thought that was above my resume, but no, I'm actually very capable of doing that, and I'm going to do it.
It's funny you mentioned that, because it really comes down to selling yourself, I think.
Yeah.
I think people consistently undervalue themselves. They think, I'm just a minimum wage employee. I just work in a convenience store. I mean, we've all been there. I was a laborer. I earned less than minimum wage at one point in my career. And I didn't say anything because they paid me cash, and I was desperate. I needed the money. I still applied to office jobs. And I remember I had an interview once. It was so insulting. I had just done firefighting. I was in the reserves. I did some laboring, and I was like, look, let me just try to make a little more money. Let me get into an office. And the woman was so rude to me. She asked me if I knew how to email. I'm like, well, yeah, I emailed you guys for this job interview. So yes, I know how to email. She asked me if I knew Word, Excel. She was worried if I would be able to keep up in an intellectual environment in an office. Now, for starters, I should not have taken that job. That was a mistake. But that person that I interviewed with, I feel like she lives in a lot of people's heads. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this voice people have when they've been a low earner their whole life. They start to think that that's just the best they can do for themselves. And I hope that our content can help shake people out of that. Like, you just need to ask, and you're going to send 100 resumes out there, and you're going to get 90 no's, and you're going to get 10 maybes. We call that an interview. That's a maybe. Okay. And from those 10 interviews, 8 of them might go bad. And then maybe you get 2 options. That's from 100 applications. We're talking about 2% success rate, but you only need one yes to break out of that cycle. But it sounds like the hardest part is up here. It's realizing that you deserve better than what you have. So, I'd like to know what you think is a good way to help people shift out of that. Hey, I'm stuck in this entry-level retail work. I'm stuck in entry-level service. I've only been able to be in restaurants. I want more, but I don't have the skills for it. I mean, what kind of pep talk would you give to that person who's stuck in that cycle?
I'm going to go back to your interview for a moment.
Go ahead.
One, I'm sorry that you had to experience that. That's awful and very, disheartening to hear that someone would treat someone like that. And
years later, it gave me some content. So
yeah, well, there you go. Way to turn it around. But
no, it was rough, but thank you.
When you're talking about that, my immediate thing goes to whoever was interviewing you is projecting, and also they need to be challenged on their biases, because someone interviewing someone who's different than them or comes from a different world or works in a very different space, to have those biases and judgments of, oh, well, you just worked here, so yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to keep up. One, that person should not be interviewing, and that's why we should be bringing in a lot of, a diverse group of people to interview candidates, so we remove as much bias as we can. But I look at something like that and I'm like, applying for something different in a field that you are not really aware of and you want to break into, being different and not having experience is like a superpower, is how I see it. Someone can come to me and has never worked in my industry before, and they're interviewing. My mind goes to, this is a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of thinking, someone that's going to come in and hasn't been, trained all these years by someone and thinks that they know the very best, and they're going to come in and be like, all right, let's change everything.
They're stuck in like old habits and just a mechanical way of doing things. You see it as a way to inject something new and shake up your work culture. Absolutely. How many people do you employ right now?
I have one full-time and another coming on soon.
Congratulations, Laura.
You.
That's really exciting.
Thank you. But yeah, I think as a leader, we need to challenge ourselves to say, I want a very diverse group of people working for me, because that's when I'm going to get the best output, when I have a bunch of very different ways of thinking. And so I would tell someone who's hesitant because they don't believe that they have, the skills or the background to work in an industry, to say, no, this actually might be a very good thing, and sell it that way. Whereas, I don't necessarily have the 5 to whatever years of experience that you might think is necessary for this role, but I've looked up what this position does and do your research so you come kind of prepared, and then think of all the different skills you can offer. Yeah, you worked in retail. You have great, communication skills with people. You're great at networking. You're great at teamwork.
They're going to be the most patient people you ever met in your life.
You want to learn.
Reminds me of a really good decision we made. We hired Trish, who is one of our intake specialists, and she's actually, in the next 2 months, she'll be the department head. Really bright, but her work experience before coming to me was Orange Theory and Chick-fil-A. That was her experience. But in my mind, she didn't even have a college degree at the time she applied, and we wanted her to do it. In my mind, there is no better person to be the first person people talk to in your business than someone who's been at Chick-fil-A or Orange Theory. I mean, dealing with fussy, upset customers, making people feel like their opinion is valued, making people feel heard, helping move people along and say, hey, come this way. We're going to give you a good experience. And we understand maybe you're having a really tough time at work, or you were in an accident and you're upset. We get it, but we're going to make this experience as smooth for you as possible. You don't learn that in a college class, but you sure as hell learn it at Orange Theory, I think. So I think you're absolutely right that these are the kind of people we should look for. And these are the kind of people who should be more confident in their abilities. The full-time person you hired, how'd you find them?
My full-time employee right now?
Yeah.
A family relationship.
All right. Do you want to talk about that?
I can.
You can? Okay. Fiance, right?
Yes.
Awesome. How'd you guys meet?
We met in high school.
Real high school sweethearts?
No,
wait a minute.
We were friends for like 6 years before the thought of even, being romantic.
When did that change?
Play. My last year of university.
Wow.
Yeah. 6 years after meeting.
Did he go to university too? Or
he went to college.
What does he do?
He was a tradesman.
What trade?
Hydro. Power line technician. What do you call it? Lineman here? Line person.
Oh, like working on the power lines, like that go up there.
Yeah.
I love that. So there again, what is he doing for you now?
So he manages our whole operations for the retail line. And then he does a lot of executive assistant things as well.
I'm so glad we're talking about this, because that is exactly the kind of person who needs to hear this. It's like, look, skilled trades are essential. It's a fantastic career. It is a fantastic career.
Great job.
But, I was a skilled trade. I was a firefighter. A dream job. But at some point in my career, I was like, this doesn't make me happy anymore. I got to a point where the alarm bells would go off and I wasn't even excited to go to a fire anymore. If you're a firefighter and you're not excited to go to a fire, like that's a problem. And I had a tough conversation with myself. Why am I not happy? And then we had that interview from hell, and it was really hard trying to figure out a way to break out of that. But your fiance was a tradesman, and now he's running is this an international enterprise that you have? You started a couple of companies. You have your media. Yeah.
And we got the retail side of things too. Oh my gosh, there's so many things we do in the business now. And that's why we're expanding. And yeah, so and it's interesting because when you talk about the whole idea of people kind of hesitating to be like, I don't have that skill set. That was him. And he was absolutely.
Was he hesitant?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. And for me, it's a lot to do with finding, the right people, and also the way that people can work together. And I don't want to make this seem like it was like, oh yeah, it's my fiance, it's an easy hire. It wasn't. It was about
I think it's harder 7 months. Than hiring a stranger.
Well, we had basically 6 to 7 months we took understanding, okay, how would we work together? What's the relationship going to be? How do we separate this from personal? We had this entire plan we kind of went through, and it came to a point where it was like, this could make sense.
How do you separate it from personal? You live together. Well, I don't know if you live together, but you're with each other every day. You're in love. You're planning a wedding. You're planning to build a family. So how do you separate that from work?
I am very good at that. I have, my business side, and then I have a kind of the personal side. And I also had a father who was very good about a big businessman. And he would always make a point to me when we're talking about anything work related, finance related. He'd always be like, I'm speaking to you as your father, or I'm speaking to you as a boss, kind of like that business dynamic here. And so I kind of transferred that over into this to say, I'm speaking to you as your partner, or I'm speaking to you as your boss right now. And when I'm speaking to you as your boss, it's no different than how I would treat any other employer, how I've ever treated anyone in the past that's worked for me. So there's a lot to it. And I think a lot comes with setting your own boundaries within the space too, and having the respect from someone, especially when you work with someone who you're closely really like in a relationship.
It sounds
with.
like it takes work from both sides.
It does.
I can imagine for him, it's really hard because he comes from his trade environment where he really knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's got the experience, and now he's doing something very, very new, but there's two new things happening. It's a new shade of his relationship with you, but also just a completely new career. So has there been any growing pains with that?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, because we took the time to figure out if we could even do it, if it would jeopardize the relationship, if we could work together, what our working styles were. I also think that's very, very important when you're working with people that you know. It's, you know them on a personal level, but you don't know how they work and what their communication styles are, how you can best support them, especially, you know, as in a boss role. So I think it took us a while to figure out if it could even work. And then when we figured, okay, I think this can work, having everything in place to be able to set ourselves up for success. So completely different office spaces, a very defined role for him that I am just the boss of, but not overly involved in unless he needs that support.
So figuring out where he has more autonomy, less autonomy, and more like, hey, just follow my direction. You said this took a few months of you guys many months of meetings. So do you remember a specific point where you guys had to really work out what the relationship would look like? Like, let's say his work performance is poor. How do you even address that?
We have a contract.
Talk about it.
We have a full contract in place that has basically, it's a 3-month probation period, which we've both agreed on. We actually sat down and negotiated a whole contract together, just like an employee would. One, it's a skill building thing also on his side, because this whole dynamic of a work environment is different. And so I kind of wanted to walk him through just all the different pieces on a working contract in this world that you have to look for.
Well, he has to be open to learning, and he's going in there and he kind of sees you probably as a teacher at this point.
I think any, good leader, manager is a teacher in that kind of respect. And so we have a full contract in place and an understanding that, obviously from a personal perspective, like I've got you and financially we're going to be okay. But from a boss perspective, if you are not adding value to the company, if you are not performing, it doesn't matter that I have a personal relationship with you. You won't be part of the business anymore. And so we have that kind of in place that says we have this period and to make sure that the relationship, the professional relationship can work and you're adding value and you're meeting, the agreed upon hours and all of that. Otherwise it's just not a great fit, and that's fine. And he'll go on and do something else, and I'll hire someone who can do the job.
Wow. That is really good that you guys took the time to come up. Did you come up with contingency scenarios? Like, did you think out like, hey, if I have to fire you, that's DEFCON 5 and this is the procedure. Did you guys talk about that? It's a little kind of, it's kind of dark, but
honestly,
you have to
when you're working with people that in your personal life, you really have to. And so, we have fallback plans from, a personal perspective of what we're going to do financially. And then also professionally, I've got, plan B, C, D, and other people that I can bring on if I need to. And
honey, I'm initiating plan C. Oh shit, I'm fired. Yeah, but at least we got the procedure laid out, so it's not personal.
You have to. You really have to, though.
Wow. So it's so exciting to see what you're doing now. Can you just give me a quick rundown of what does the current Laura Whaley empire look like? Because so many people, we love your videos, and I want to talk more about some of the characters and things. We love your videos, but that is just the surface of what you really do. So what does your empire look like today?
Yeah. So I will say I worked in the corporate world for like many, many, many years. And I still do. A lot of people are like, well, if you leave the corporate world and, start your own thing, then your content. And I'm like, listen, you don't leave the corporate world. I just work with them in a different capacity now. Who do you think pays the bills?
It's like the corporate world gives us a bunch of luggage, that we have. And then we just carry that baggage into our content. But you're
always working with the corporate world, like and just in different capacities. And so I was working for a big company for years and years and years. And I left last year, and a year before that, I basically set out an entire plan. And I said, okay, if I want to give this a real go to make a business for myself, work for myself, which was never really on my radar until then, we're going to proof of concept this. we're going to figure out what this looks like from a business perspective. We're going to proof of concept the financials. Is it a viable source of income?
You say we. Did you have a supportive manager?
Me,
who was
myself,
helping
and
you? You, Brenda, Donna Sue.
Yeah,
okay.
No, this was all
These
me.
people have been inside you all along.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, this was all me. And I would get, advice from people here and there that I respect, but I had to do this by myself. My partner was completely, still working in his trade and hands off in it. And he was kind of that role of, I will support you in whatever you choose to do. And if you go and you try to make this business work and it doesn't work, I'm your fallback and we can figure it out until your next kind of thing. And so that was his role. He wasn't involved.
Good on him. Like what you couldn't ask for a better partner than that.
No.
Like just someone who's like, we are a team.
Yes.
I got you, you got me, and we're going to help each other out.
100%.
So that's a blessing in itself.
Yeah.
But you started at zero, right? You didn't have
Nothing.
a following.
No.
But you were in the corporate world. When did you start saying, hey, I want to make some content and see how it goes?
November of 2020 is when I started to post.
So about, what was that, like just a few months into the pandemic? The pandemic was 2020, right?
Yeah.
That's when it started, March 2020. So March of 2020, you have how many followers on Instagram?
Oh,
do you think?
Instagram, like 5,000.
Okay.
Just from personal.
Just personal.
It's so popular. No,
it's
I probably
funny,
don't even know half the people.
To the average person, that's a lot. We're all sitting here thinking, wow, you had a lot of friends.
Maybe it was less than that. I don't know. Maybe like 2,000, 3,000. Wow. I don't know. It was a couple thousand.
Well, not 4 million.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
When did you start your first skit? Do you remember that first skit?
November of 2020, I started posting on TikTok and it started to get traction. A couple of videos went viral and I was like, oh, okay, let's put some more intention behind this. And that's when I really started to intentionally post. And then by early the next year, my following really took off.
That's almost overnight. I mean, November to early the next year. I mean, do you remember that time you crossed 1 million followers on TikTok?
Not on TikTok, but I remember on Instagram.
Why was Instagram more of a memorable moment for you? I
was on a work trip for social media. I was on a cruise actually, and I had brought one of my Work Bestie, the Work Bestie in all my videos. He's a close friend of mine. And
this is the voice, the disembodied voice
yes.
that we hear.
Work Bestie. We were working together at that time. Truly was a Work Bestie. And I brought him along on this cruise. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hit 1 million followers tonight.
Wow.
And he's like, you're going to do it. I'm like, that's insane. And it was like, I think like 2 a.m. And we just sat up and refreshed. And then I remember it flipped and he's like, "Ooh, congrats." And I'm like, sweet. Time to go to bed. It was so anticlimactic.
It really is.
But it was so exciting. And my mom probably texted me and was freaking out because she's been so supportive throughout this entire thing.
Shout out to the moms. Shout out to the moms. I love that. My mom's the same way. It's always the first comment on my videos.
Yeah.
Good job, honey.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
That's what it was. It was family support. It was close friend support. It was just, it was one of those things where it kept growing. And when I really slowed down to be like 1 million people, I'm like, whew, that kind of freaks me out, to be honest. That's very overwhelming.
Does it freak you out? I said 4 million. I don't know exactly what all of your subscribers are. I might be underselling it. How many subscribers do you have across all your platforms right now?
Oh my God, where's my dad? He always tracks these numbers for me. Over 5 million, because I've got just over 3 on TikTok and 2.4 on Instagram, and YouTube's at 500,000. And
you're killing it on YouTube.
Facebook recently,
really,
it was bumping. Yeah,
people are still using Facebook. I gotta get on that.
Anyway, so yeah, when I stopped to think about it, it's a lot. That's a lot of people. And I don't take that for granted. I'll never forget. I was on a call with TikTok actually. And we were talking about, they're like, oh, what's your goals to grow, or what's your next milestones, and how do you want to keep growing your account? I'm like, grow it. I'm like, oh my gosh, just hit 1 million. I'm good. I don't want to grow it anymore. That's a lot of people. And I'm so grateful for everyone that's there. And I create for the audience I have, not in mind of how can I grow this more.
That's an interesting mindset. And I think it goes beyond just subscribers and things like that. You hit 1 million, you're like, this is enough for me. I'm happy.
So happy.
I like this. So you're not creating content to grow and get more followers. What motivates you to keep producing this stuff? Because your production quality keeps getting better and better.
Thank you.
These videos are great.
Thank you. I enjoy it. And I also have an amazing community online that enjoys it as well. And I create for them. I don't need more. I think when you get into this mentality, like you said, it goes well beyond just social media. When you're constantly like more, it's a very toxic mindset to get into. And the reality is you're never going to stop and be happy.
Why is it toxic? Because we talked earlier in the podcast about how we were, is there a decline in America? And it's my opinion that hustle culture is on the decline. The relentless pursuit of more, bigger, excess.
Hustle culture is interesting because I believe in hustle culture if it's short term. Because I think about, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now with my business if I didn't quote unquote hustle for about a year to proof of concept everything, to kind of work the 2 jobs in parallel to make sure that it was going to work and I'd put the effort in to make it work and build it. But I knew that hustle was short term.
Interesting.
Beyond that year mark,
cool, but it's got to be
controlled, and it's got to be short.
You can't do a 40-year hustle sprint. That's not possible.
You can't. You're human. You're going to burn out, and then your output, the quality of your output, is just going to decline so significantly, and it's going to, start to eat away at so many other areas of your life. So, a hustle culture to me is short term to set yourself up for a more sustainable long term. Is kind of how I see it.
Is there a point where you can say, look, there's a certain amount of hustle culture that's good for you? The sit down, do a proof of concept, grind out a bunch of Work Bestie videos, make a killer org chart. I love that you made an org chart for your characters, but at some point you got to stop. Do you have signals you look for where you're like, listen, I have to go into the hustler mentality for a minute. I'm going to apply to 100 jobs. I'm going to make a bunch of content. I'm going to do something to change my life. At what point is it becoming toxic instead of productive? Are there warning signs you look for?
Well, for me, for example, when I was setting up this whole business, it was a date. My thing was, my goal was if I can surpass my current salary of income by X date, then my proof of concept has proved successful and I can move to the next step of it.
So you gave yourself checkpoints.
For that, I did. Yeah. Okay. And now with just regular life, I think we all go through periods where I hate the word like hustling, but where you're hustling, where you're working a little bit more, a little bit extra.
I think that's I'm glad you put it that way. We talk about hustle culture and someone listening might think, hustle culture, what do you mean? Like, 14 hours of overtime? Like, no, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about like a concerted, temporary effort with a specific goal in mind to improve your life in some way. Yes. You're taking on a little bit of extra pain, expending a little extra energy to get to this next level. Yeah. But when you get there, you're going to have to catch your breath.
You're putting yourself in sport mode. Temporarily.
Sport mode.
That's what it is.
Can we make a t-shirt about that?
Put it in sport mode. I think you temporarily work a little bit harder. And I think that's true just for your entire kind of career or just life in general. You work harder at certain things. But for me now, I have signs and things I look for that kind of tell me like, all right, take your foot off the gas a little bit. Like you got to focus on yourself.
What are some of those things you look for where you're like, hey, I'm starting to get in danger territory. We got to turn off sport mode.
When I hit a creative block, like I'm a naturally very creative person. And when I sit down and I'm like, all right, let's pump out some creative, whether that's scripting or, for anything I'm working on for clients, I sit there and I'm like, I have nothing. I'm like, okay, that's a sign.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a sign I look for too with my work. Yeah. And when you're finding I have no ideas, I can't problem solve, I can't create. What I think a lot of people fall into this trap is they think I'm not a creative person. We all are. There was a time in everyone's life, I don't care how disillusioned or jaded or tired you are. There was a time in your life where you would go out as a child and go play in the grass and you'd pretend you were a dinosaur. And in your mind, you feel like you could see the pterodactyls and the brontosauruses. Like there's a creative energy inside all of us, but it needs fuel. It needs rest. It doesn't work without those things. So I think a mistake a lot of people make is they go, well, I'm just not a creative person. I just don't have any good ideas. I don't know. But that's not true. You're probably just really stretched thin. You're probably tired. You're probably a little overworked. So when you hit that warning sign, what do you do to get your mojo back?
My support network. So I kind of have built in my life a good kind of support network for myself of things that I know make me feel better. I know serve myself. I just come back to the basics. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating to nourish my body?
Sleep comes first, then food.
No specific order.
And then the support network.
But that is your support network. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to realize. It's like the basic necessities, the basic needs of a human existence are they being met? Am I having enough social time with the people in my life? You know, do I have people, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a therapist because I know that's not accessible for everyone, but do I have people in my life that I can just talk to that will listen, or someone that can offer me support that potentially a therapist kind of relationship could? Am I making time for the things that genuinely bring me joy? It comes back to all of those things. For me also, my yoga meditation practice, it's a big support network for myself. And so it's just really taking time to come back to the basics and stepping off the gas a little bit, like I'm gearing up to do actually in July, to just reset so that you can come back stronger and make your success more sustainable.
Oh yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up and talking about going back to the yoga practice, because that takes time out of your day. And I think one thing we see with, you know, whether we call it hustle culture or sport mode, really like that sport mode. It's pretty cool. You know, there's a lot of influencers I see on social media who like to say, you need to be grinding 110% all the time. You know, no time for family, no time for hobbies. Hobbies are a waste. What are you, a child? And if you don't do it, someone hungrier than you is going to take it from you. Have you seen those influencers?
I love those.
They're always selling some like Alpha Male Academy. It's like $579 or something stupid like that. It's bullshit.
Yeah,
it really is. You've accomplished so much, and I don't sense any, 110%, you know, forget family, forget hobbies. I have work to do. I have to grind. You're setting really clear limits on when those bursts of energy are going to be, because it's simply not possible to do that all the time. You said something's coming in July. Are you at liberty? Something is coming in July.
Oh, I'm just taking time for myself in July. I'm kind of stepping back a little bit.
Doing now? What are the changes you're going to make?
Yeah, so I'm just going to be more mindful of the days off, or truly days off, taking a little bit more time for myself, you know, taking time off, if you will, but which is different now that I am employing myself versus, you know, working for someone else.
It's funny. A lot of people think, when you're self-employed, it's easier to take time off. It's easier.
It's different.
You have fewer people to ask permission, but it's not really easier.
Yeah, it's different. So I think for me, it's focusing a lot on the day to day and basically coming in with the mentality of, if something comes up that is not a hell yes, it's a no, or it's a not right now.
Can you say more about that rule? Because that's something I'm trying to get better at, and it's hard. Because especially as an entrepreneur, you really want to say yes to everything because you don't really know.
There's moments for that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So what is this system you're using where if it's not a hell yes, it's a no? How does that work?
So those are more the moments where I need a little bit more focused time on me. So for example, the last couple of months, I've kind of been in this mindset of walk through the doors that are open for you and try them out. Say yes to new opportunities, say yes to different things, learn, absorb, really put yourself out there, but say a lot of yeses. And now I'm shifting into this. If an opportunity comes up and we're not immediately like, yes, this is a great opportunity. This is what I want. This is how I want to spend my time this month. It's a not right now. Because I do not want to prioritize work over the next month, knowing that I need to prioritize myself so that I'm able to show up after this period for work.
Oh, you're conserving resources for the next time you enter sport mode. That's really what I want people to take away from this. If you're really pro hustle culture, like it's not going to work out for you if you're trying to do it 100% of the time with no breaks. I know that people in that camp will look at us and say, you guys sound like wimps. You sound lazy. You're so new age, millennial meditation. It's like, listen, you can't just put your foot on the accelerator on a car all the time. That engine's going to blow up, and humans are no different.
And that comes back to the more culture of, I know so many people that was their mentality, and it was like, oh, great, you're taking time off, like easier for me to get to the top. I've seen so many of those comments of you're making it easier for me. And I'm like, good. You know, if that is your mentality of you just want to beat and like keep going and get ahead of everyone, amazing. And you're going to work for it. I have nothing against that. But one, I don't believe you're ever going to get to your destination because you're never going to be satisfied with what you have. And two, when you reach your top, you're going to look around, it's going to be quite lonely.
That's a really important point a lot of people miss. There's some people, they get so hyper focused on competing and winning, they forget that at the end of the day, we're a community. And there's no point being, I guess, a king without a kingdom. Like, Who cares if you make it to that corner office if no one out there likes you? None of the other managers respect you. None of the subordinates like you. What's the point? What is it you really wanted? Did you want to be a leader? Did you want to be that crabby person in the corner office who just stabbed 1,000 backs to get there, who no one trusts? Or did you want to be an inspirational leader? I think a lot of people, they focus so much on getting to that next step. They never pause and do some reverse engineering. Like who do I really want to be? Who is the person I want to be? People talk so much about what they want to be. They don't say who they want to be. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, where if you're just doing this ruthless climb to the top without any period of self-reflection, you're going to get there and realize I'm no happier now than I was when I started this campaign, but I am lonelier. Yeah. I think Absolutely. That's a real risk. So do you do any life planning?
Life planning?
Yeah. Do you, because you do so much. It's hard to look at what you're doing because you have a clothing fashion line that's coming out. You've got at least 2 businesses that I know of. You know, do you draw this out on a piece of paper or are you just kind of going with the flow? How does this even work?
I'm a planner in the shorter term. So I'm not necessarily someone that's going to plan out 5 years because if there's anything I know about myself, it's that I change constantly and what I want, my goals, my life, it changes constantly. And so it's important to me to take moments of pause to say like, all right, these are the goals I had. This is where I'm at. What do I want moving forward? If it's changed, great. Let's kind of readjust. And just going back to our previous, conversation, I think for me, it all comes down to this idea of not getting so caught up on creating a career that you forget to create a life. And so when you're constantly in this mode of planning of go, okay, I want more of this. I'm going to do this. This is the job I want next. You are forgetting to build a life. And so when you get to that place, whether it's a certain, I want to make this much money or I want to be the CEO of a company or, whatever it is, you don't have much outside of that. And so when you go to, all right, I've made it, I'm going to, call up a friend. Well, those are relationships you've potentially been neglecting for years. Yeah,
you hope the friend is there. It's so funny. You mentioned something and I might be out of pocket, but I think the goal, I want to be CEO of a company, is probably the stupidest goal you can have. It makes no damn sense. What company? CEO of what? Big company, little company? And who are you? Are you a ruthless, capitalist, greed is good? Are you an inspiring leader? Who the hell are you? CEO of a company? That doesn't tell me anything. Yeah. I don't know who the hell you are. I mean, am I out of line? Is that a good goal to have? I want to be CEO of a company.
I don't think it's good or bad. I think having a desire to...
You are just so much more calm than I am. And I really appreciate it. It's the yoga.
Everyone has just such different goals. And I don't think it's fair to say if it's good or bad. It's more, why do you want that? What comes along with that? What are you chasing in that title? Really all it is a title. Because I'm a CEO right now of a company. That doesn't, it means a lot, but for me, there's so much more to the title that I'm proud of than the title itself. And so I just think when it comes to those long-term goals, it's taking it a step further and saying, why? Do you want to have power? Do you want the title? Do you want the flex of it? Do you what is it about that is so appealing to you? And I think that's going to give you a lot more information about what you're actually after.
I love that you brought that up because what you're saying is, look, the title is fine. It's not good or bad if you want that. But if you take a minute and pause and say, wait, why do I want this? It might prevent people from going down a bad road. I mean, I'm grateful for my experience in the fire service. It was one of the most meaningful periods of my life. I got to live a dream job and help my community. It was wonderful. But my whole life, since I was a kid, since I was 4 or 5 years old, I just wanted to be a firefighter. And that's all I had in my brain. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a firefighter. I think if I had paused, I knew why I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted the adventure. I wanted the camaraderie. I wanted to help people. But I never, ever said, wait. Okay. What do you want to be? You want to be a firefighter. All right. Freaking cool, dude. Who do you want to be? I never asked myself that question till I was 4 years into that career. And I had to get into kind of a dark place. I started noticing I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy at work. I noticed I was having trouble maintaining friendships because as I was becoming less sure of myself and less happy in my career, it was making me a less pleasant person to hang out with. I'd never asked who I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be the missing piece. Why do you want that title, and who do you want to be when you're there? Is this something everyone should be asking themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a level of who you want to be, who you're working towards being or becoming. And then also, how you want your life to look, what's important to you. And how does that fit in with your kind of life structure, especially when it comes to work. I think also taking time to self-reflect on, I don't care who I was 10 years ago, whether I had that dream of being a firefighter. It's who am I now and what serves me best in this season of life. You can't live in the past
if you're going to do this right.
Yeah. And sort of what your goals are, but why you have them. It's hard to answer stuff like this because it's so personal to everyone's kind of own experiences. And there's also, I think I always come back to this, like, what is your definition of success? Like for that CEO example, why does getting to the CEO, why is that your measure of success? And then kind of adding more to it of what does success look like for you? And is that actually aligned with your version of success? Or is that just what society's told you is success? Because not everything that sounds glamorous and we've been told, like, once you make this kind of paycheck, you've made it. Great. That might be the truth for a lot of people, but that might not be the truth for you. And so when you get there, you're never going to feel accomplished because that goal was never really for yourself anyways. It was to appease maybe your parents or a society that told you that you get there and you've made it.
It's checking off boxes that you thought were like, hey, here's my little scorecard, but it's not necessarily giving you the tools you need to be sustainably happy. Because let's not bullshit. Money does buy happiness. You need a certain minimum amount where your basic needs are met, and that's going to help you quite a bit. I think where some people fall in this, I want to be a CEO trap, is they assume, I'm going to be a millionaire and I'm going to be powerful and respected. A lot of CEOs out there who aren't respected. There's a lot of CEOs out there who don't make a lot of money. There's a lot of CEOs out there who don't have power. Just being a thing doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And I think for the CEO example, if you want to be a CEO or whatever job it is, find someone in that job and shadow their day-to-day life. And that's going to give you a lot of perspective on what that actually looks like when you take away the glamorous elements that you've attached to it.
Yeah.
I think that's really important with different professions because, for content creator and being an influencer, for example, I was fortunate enough to have a friend who's been an influencer for like 10 years. So I saw what that liberty to say who that is? Like. We'll keep it private for this reason. But I was able to see the good and the bad, what it actually took to have that job. And I don't think that that's commonly known of the business behind social media and what that looks like, but understanding that there's like what the business actually looks like behind social media.
People think being an influencer is so glamorous. I'm really glad you brought this up.
There's moments.
Because there are, but I think what's happened, especially in the early days of Instagram, which kind of formed our culture around our relationship with these things, is they think, picture in the private jet and here's you looking pretty in front of the Trevi fountain and you're at LA's hottest restaurant, and they think, wow, I wish I could be an influencer. Look how great it is. You talked about the good and the bad of being an influencer. What are some things about being an influencer? Well, actually, let me dial that back. Do you consider yourself an influencer?
I have influence. I think many of us are influencers without knowing it. I think I hate the title influencer, if I'm being honest. I think it's just gotten so muddy over the years and not really well defined, but by, textbook definition, an influencer is someone who has influence over a group of people. And that's, yes, I would say I would fit into that category.
You definitely, whether we like it or not, we are. You gain a certain following and find that, I guess I'm an influencer, certainly a content creator. Was there a time in your life where you thought, wow, I would love to be a content creator? That sounds exciting. I want to do it.
I always enjoyed making content. So it would have seemed appealing to me. Influencer, not so much. I think a lot because I had seen kind of what went into it, but also I didn't really know what the business looked like. Like, okay, cool. You're an influencer. You have a platform. Now what? You have to
Exactly.
build an entire business behind that.
People think the money comes automatically. They think, oh, you've got 1 million followers, you must be rich.
Oh
it's
my gosh, I got that all the time. You have 1
No.
million followers. Why are you still working
These
corporate?
are followers, not dollars.
And
That's
I'm like,
not-
who's paying my bills? Because in Canada, we don't have a TikTok creator fund. So I wasn't getting paid
There's
by
no
any
creator fund in
No.
Canada? It's pennies for what it's worth. You're not missing much.
I know,
Yeah.
but people would always assume like you have this, and I'm like, I'm working on building the business behind it to make it sustainable long term. And so learning the whole business behind social media and how that looks, because it's very similar in a lot of ways to the corporate world, and it's plugged into the corporate world in
It really
a lot of
is,
different capacities. Essentially, you're just a digital marketer in a lot of ways.
You become a vendor to a corporation in a lot of ways.
You are.
That's how it is. You deal with some marketing agent and you're negotiating contracts back and forth. It's
100%. You're working with people. You're reading briefs. You're making up your creative plans for things. You're doing a lot of pitches. Like it's a whole job in itself behind
and there's up and downs too. Like we lost a brand deal recently and it was really disappointing, but then we gained another one. There's this sort of highs and lows of it. What are some things when you finally got into the content creator influencer space? Because you really have a certain opinion of it until you get into it.
Yeah.
Were there maybe some downsides or some prizes that the average person doesn't realize happens when you become a full-time like influencer content creator?
Downsides, I mean, it's talked about quite a bit, but just you open yourself to a lot of opinions and negativity online, which is okay. You just need to make sure that your mental health is in a place where you're able to navigate that and it doesn't rock you to your core. There's also just a lot of shifts in your personal life that you start to, I guess, experience, because there becomes a point where you have a certain level of following and people start to associate that with some sort of hierarchy or power, or you notice people start to creep back into your life and kind of like, hey, it's been so long, we haven't caught up. And you've got to separate that from people who are interested in you on a personal level and people who are interested in your brand or your power that you have online or your following or something like that.
That's a tough situation to get in.
It is.
That sucks. It hurts a bit when someone comes in and you can kind of smell it when it's like,
you've got to be aware of it.
Interested in me as a person and what I have to say, or are they just hoping to grab a selfie with me?
Yes. It also impacts the people within your direct network. And so you need to be very mindful of who you're posting online. For example, you never really know I have a fiance online, even though he works for me, but,
cat's out of the bag. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. There's some articles online that have published about it too. So it's fine. But, it was kind of an early on conversation with us to go, okay, well, we know we're together, but as far as online version of me is concerned, I'm going to be single or just not know of anything, because I don't want the internet to start to interject into my relationship. I don't care about the opinions.
Space. That's your sacred space, and you have the power to shut the door and say, no. This is where me and my fiance go, and this is our space, and everything else is outside.
I chose this career path, or I chose to be online in public. He didn't choose that. And so he's not really comfortable with that. There's very minimal things that he's comfortable with online. And so respecting his boundary there, and then kind of saying, that's a part of my life that just doesn't really fit with my online content, and that's okay. And same thing when it comes to my family. Yeah. Like my mother is my biggest supporter online. She cheers me on. She texts me every time I hit a new milestone. It's really sweet.
Shout out to Mom. I love it.
But she wants nothing to do with the content. Yeah. And in terms of her being in it. And so keeping that level of privacy kind of for the people in your circle that didn't choose that is really important. And then also just safety concerns come along with it too, which is a big side of social media, that once you are public enough, I mean, also is just isn't specific to influencers. You could have 5 followers online and still experience security risks.
Absolutely. Just your probability of hitting it goes up the more people. Have you had any security issues come up in the past? Like people try to find you or anything? I've had someone on at least 2 occasions come to my office looking for me, which is really scary, not fun. Did you have anything similar?
I've had people show up at like hotels. I've had some issues with stalkers. Yeah, it's scary. Unfortunately, it comes with the territory. It's just knowing how to navigate that and always being mindful of what you're posting at what time, where your location is, making sure you're not posting in real time. There's a lot of just things that stuff goes on and sometimes like, oh, I want to share this, on my social media. I'm like, okay, but Laura, your social media isn't the same as what it was years back when it was just personal.
It's not just your friends anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you have to be a little bit more mindful, I think, in that sense, just to keep yourself safe and to keep those within your network safe and comfortable and really respect the boundaries of those around you and not choosing to put people online who don't want to be online.
Yeah.
Which also ends up being better for you too, because then there's areas in my life that I don't even think about, like, oh, I'm going to bring my phone out and take a picture for Instagram because it's that Instagram doesn't fit in that part of my life.
There's a lot of people I meet who are content producers, and the phone is always out. They're trying to document every moment, but bad at that. Oh, it's tough because you feel obligated to do it, but at the same time, it's almost like having a job with your phone on 24/7. It's like even if you're a self-employed content producer, you need those boundaries, because if it infects every aspect of your life, where you're really in trouble is if you start dreaming about making reels. That's when you're in trouble. You need to take a space to go by. No, that's fantastic. I'm glad you shared that, because it is a tough thing. Was there anything else about the content producer, influencer career that surprised you and you got into it?
It's a lot of reading contracts. There's a lot of admin that goes into content creation. There's a lot of communication that goes into it. I spent my first year basically building relationships within the space and partnerships that I wanted to cultivate over a long period of time. And so a lot of it was just, networking, relationship building, a lot of reading contracts, a lot of boring stuff, setting up a whole business. It's a lot of that.
Everyone says networking is the key to success. And everyone says how important it is, but no one talks about how to do it.
Yeah.
So when you talk about networking and building those partnerships, what did that look like? Do you remember your first actual paying brand partner?
My first one, I don't remember, but I do recall from an early time really getting to know the people behind the brands. It's also a really driving force for me of working with people is, do I like working with the people behind the brand? Obviously I have to like the brand and the product too, but it's the people, and I was really intentional and still am about, I want to connect directly with the people behind the brands. I also want to learn kind of about their jobs, because I just find it fascinating, and like, what do you do for the company? And what are the titles? And I love that. And I think that this position I'm in now has put me in such a fun area just to be able to explore like a bunch of different career paths or learn about them.
You get to touch a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's cool. But for me, it was just more working with people. And then I've had to, like, when people have left certain companies, I get an email from them from a different company. They're like, hey, it's me again. I work for like this company now. Are you open to, and that's a lot of the influencer territory, is building strong relationships, being easy to work with, being professional. Though I have people on my team, I always like to deal directly, at least within quite a large capacity, actually, of a lot of my partnerships. Because I want that face-to-face. I want that communication. I also like when people enjoy working with me and keeping things very professional. Yeah. And so that's what I try to focus on with partners.
I like that. No, that's good. It's always exciting talking to you, Laura. I love how you started in that entry-level role and built yourself all the way up into this great, powerful CEO. I admire you tremendously, and I'm really glad you're out here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the characters you created for your show.
Let's do it.
It's so easy to pick on Brenda. I don't know if I want to go there right away.
Go for it. I love Brenda.
Who the hell is Brenda? Let's start with that.
Brenda's Brenda. What do you mean, who's Brenda?
What motivates this character? Who is she?
I think with all my characters and Brenda too, I kind of take general, I don't know if it's a stereotype or just personalities that are very prevalent within any kind of workforce that you're in. Obviously a little bit more specific to office life and corporate life, but taking the Brendas, the people who work is all they've kind of ever known. Someone that focused so much on building a career, they kind of forgot to build a life.
Like they're trapped in sport mode almost.
They really are, but it's become their entire identity, and they can't disconnect at this point because it's so challenging to disconnect that they're just like, well, I may as well work anyways because I'm going to stress about it if I'm taking time off. And
I
really
can see the stress in Brenda's body language, by the way. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
Holy cow. You nailed that character. And the description you're giving is perfect. They're trapped in that hustle culture. It's all they've known.
It's textbooks, it's policy, it's you have to do it this way because that's the way it's always been done. And if you go against the grain, it's very like, she's like, what do you do? What do you mean? That's like what you
play the character so well. You play it so well. I wonder if you're tapping into an inner voice of some kind. Is there a little bit of Brenda in you? I think there's a little bit of Brenda in everyone.
I just think some people have, for myself in particular, have kind of been able to navigate it by setting boundaries over time. And I'm not a very textbook person. I don't follow rules very well. So I do follow rules. I shouldn't say that, but I like to kind of push the grain of thing. Okay, I get it. But like, why don't we do things a little differently now? And I think every character, there's a little piece of me in every single character. Like people are always like, what character are you? And people always assume I'm Haley just because it's the one that doesn't wear a wig and half the internet thinks my name is Haley. So I've kind of rolled with it. But no character on their own is me. And I think that that's funny because people always assume in every skit that I'm one or the other. So but I'm always like, you realize I'm both those people, right? Like that.
I think we all are. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, that's what characters are. They're just an extreme example of little pieces of us. So for those who aren't super familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about each of these characters? Some of the more prevalent ones that we see. We talked about Brenda. Brenda's uptight. She's trapped in hustle culture. She knows nothing but work and she's a rule follower. Anything else about her that we should know?
That's Brenda. That's Brenda. She has a hard time disconnecting. Yeah, didn't really build up too much of life. There's a little bit of parental pressure that's kind of been hinted at through episodes where she grew up in a household that's like, if you don't do this, you haven't made it and you have to be successful and blah, blah, blah. So a lot of parental influence in that sense.
Like as a kid, there was this hyper pressure, like get good grades, go to college, be top of your class, get a good corporate job, work there 20 years. Man, if that's not the millennial story, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's Brenda. Who else is
We've got Donna Sue.
Fan favorite. So glad you brought her up. I love Donna Sue. Who is, for those who don't know, Donna Sue is the sweetest, most Southern mama bear. I love her. Talk about Donna Sue. Who is she?
She's been with the company for 33 years. She's a lifer in the company pretty much. And so she's seen the evolution of work, but she's not super, tied into like, it has to be done this way. She loves like gossip. She just loves to learn about people. She sees the human element in the workforce. So she does not hesitate to ask kind of personal questions or get into things. She's also a safe space for people where she'll kind of give out advice that she's learned throughout the years. She's kind of that work mom that we all love to have. That's Donna Sue. But she also doesn't take any crap.
Oh, no, she doesn't at all. No, you nailed it. It's she's like a mama bear, but also has her boundaries and she's a lifer. And it's funny you say that because typically there's this negative connotation to being a lifer in an organization. 30 years. Oh, what have you done with your life? But Donna Sue is loving it. She seems happy. So how does someone like Donna Sue exist? How does someone work 30 years in a company and be happy and healthy? And she doesn't seem to be slowing down.
No, there was an episode, and this one's I really wanted to make it a while ago. Donna Sue kind of opened up about, I think it was her and Brenda was like, yeah, I'm going to, I'll wait till retirement to be able to enjoy these things, blah, blah, blah. And Donna Sue had kind of opened up and she said, that's what my late husband had thought too.
Oh my God.
And so I've heard this story. It's so heartbreaking so many times within the workforce of people who they saved up all of their money and put everything into savings and I'm going to have a great retirement. I don't want to travel now because I'm going to wait till I'm retired to do that. And I have this dream, but it's okay because when I retire and a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there's a group of people out there that do that don't make it to retirement. And so I think postponing your dreams for an unpromised future it's really heartbreaking to see. Yeah. And so in that episode, Donna Sue kind of opened up about that and basically had said he put off living for a future that he never was able to live through. And so I think it's just a good reminder of when you're in this mindset of I'll do it later, I'll do it when I can, I'll do it in retirement. I'm saving all this for retirement. It's kind of like you need to enjoy a little bit now because you're not guaranteed to make it to retirement.
It really, life is so uncertain.
Yeah.
We take for granted that we have this kind of laid out roadmap of this plan and these phases, these seasons of life, and none of them are guaranteed.
No.
They really never are. And all we have is the present.
Yeah.
And there's limitations. There's going to be times where you have to grind out an awful day in the office and do some work that sucks. That's going to happen. It's real life. And we just got to be grown-ups and grin and bear it. But the overall trend of our life is we need to be more like Donna Sue and be like, we need to enjoy the ride we are on because really it's all we have.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is with boundary setting is what it sounds like. Is there anything else missing?
No, Donna Sue she works because she enjoys it. And she makes a point to, if she needs to connect or disconnect for something, she just disconnects. She does what she wants to do. She's also loyal to the company. But she's not going to put her life on hold for a company, and she values the people. And I think that that's why she stays, is because she loves the people that she works with and gets true enjoyment from it.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, people tend to knock lifers and, well, what are you doing through life? And it's like, I'll never forget. I was in a conversation once with a leader at the company, and we were talking about, I don't know, someone who had worked all weekend. And I was kind of like, oh, well, like, why are people doing that? And he said, well, some people enjoy that. Some people want to work with their time. And I think that that's important to note. It's okay if you love working, and if you love what you do and you genuinely want to keep doing it outside of your working hours, and that's great. As long as you're doing that for you and not out of obligation or pressure from someone else, like, that's okay.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's the difference between, I do this because it gives me meaning and a sense of fulfillment in my life. That's fantastic. And frankly, if you're doing that in your career, you're going to go far. If you're doing it because you love it, that's fantastic. But if it's because I'm terrified of my boss, if it's because I want to get to that corner office one day and this is the only way, that's not good. That's how you become a Brenda and not a Donna Sue.
Or if
Donna Sue is very successful.
Because, I am just going to keep working through the weekend, because if I stop, I have to face my real life. And I have to face
that's a tough one.
All the things I've been shoving under the rug that I don't want to address. So I'm just going to occupy myself with busy work and never really have to face it.
That is sad. Saying,
it's so true.
I don't want to face the problems in my personal life, so I'll throw myself into my work. Frankly, I think I did that at one point in the fire service. I remember, oh man, this was, it took a lot. It took a lot to become a firefighter. It's all I ever wanted. And so it took a lot of little chops before that tree finally came down. And I was like, I need to get out of here and do something different. I remember one night I was out partying with my buddies. I was young, and we were sitting on the beach. We were in Encinitas, kind of bar hopping. And we sat there, and I remember I was just looking at the ocean with my friend. And for the first time I said out loud, I said, I don't think I like my job, dude. And I remember, I think my voice quavered a bit. I was so scared to vocalize that and put it in the community. And what I had done for years was I just picked up lots of overtime. And my family remembers I'd do 10 shifts in a row. Just be a fireman, be a fireman. That's all you ever wanted. Be a fireman. You're not happy. It's because you're not being a fireman enough. Do more of it. And I never took a minute and said, and it took a lot of little cuts, but I remember, I'll never forget the first time I just admitted, like, oh my God, I'm not happy with my life. My personal life isn't good, and this career is not feeding it. But as hard as it was, I'm really glad I hit that point where I was able to admit that I wasn't happy. I think we're so pressured to try to look strong and not be a whiner that we don't want to admit when something's not working for us.
We don't take the space to be able to even understand it.
Dude, it absolutely comes back to us. So who are some other characters we should meet and talk about?
Characters. Who do we got? We got Bethany. And she's just like your ruthless, like says it how it is, very blunt, not taking, like, will not work a second of overtime, calls it how she sees it. Possibly get in trouble a little bit here and there, but she's just kind of the voice inside of all of us that things that we want to say at work that we like kind of hesitate to, like, she'll just say them.
She's that gut reaction.
Yeah.
Who the hell are you to tell me this person?
Tell you how it is.
So when we talk about the How to Professionally Say series, is that Bethany talking?
How to professionally say? Yeah. It's more just taking, I get a lot of input from my community for those ones. It's just more taking things that we'd want to say. So I guess you could say kind of the Bethany versions of words, and then putting them into something that is just a different way to kind of communicate those.
I love it. I think it can be a career saver for a lot of people. It also helps with your internal talk too.
Yes.
I don't think we talk enough about the way we speak to ourselves up here. Is there, when you have the How Do You Professionally Say series, do you think a little bit about people's internal dialogue?
I think about more so giving people different options of how to vocalize something. So I think when we're communicating at work, like if I was going to say to you, you're annoying me at work.
Wow, that's hard. Okay. Had to hear it though.
And that's, we're having a conversation and you're annoying me. And that's what I want to say. It's kind of taking that, but offering kind of a solution. It's like, one, why are you annoying me? My one this morning was about like, you're stepping on my toes, kind of like doing the work. And it's like, cool, we can acknowledge that you're doing that and it's annoying me. what do we change moving forward? And so they're usually a lot longer because, for example, I would say something, our close collaboration, I literally think I posted this one this morning, but our close collaboration is causing duplicate work, which is a very big frustration, I think. And a lot of times when people kind of are stepping on toes is you're doing the same stuff and it's a lot of duplicate work. And so, but then there's always kind of a piece of, let's define where your work kind of starts and ends so that we can avoid this, so that there's actually a resolution instead of just that vocal, you're annoying me and you're stepping on my toes. It's giving people kind of a way to reframe the frustration's there, the acknowledgement of why that's frustrating, but also what can we do about open dialogue for resolution?
Why is it important to have this series at all? Like, why does this matter? Shouldn't we just be blunt and tell people exactly how we're feeling?
You can. And I think
that is for those who don't know, that's how you professionally say fuck around and find out. Okay.
You absolutely can. I think that there is a way to communicate things that is a bit more effective and it removes a lot of the emotion, which is what the series kind of does, is we usually get triggered and it's a very emotional response. And I'm just a big believer in you don't respond when you're triggered emotionally. You don't respond to emails if you're angry. You take a moment to step back and remove the emotion so that you can have an effective talk or communication or resolution, emotions aside.
Is there a reason it's important to do that communication without emotion in it? Like why do we even need to take a pause?
It's hard to navigate the core of the frustration or the emotion when you're so deep into an emotion. And that's just not work specific. It's specific with everything, is when you feel something so intently and you haven't been able to necessarily even associate the emotion to what you're feeling, let alone the root of the actual issue or what triggered that for you. It's so ineffective to try to problem solve when you're in that state because you haven't actually taken the time to reflect on what needs to be solutioned.
Like you can get mad at the wrong thing.
Yeah. Or it comes up a lot in relationships. It's like, for me, a big frustration at work, it was when people would come and talk to me at my desk when I was in the middle of something. And it's
the cubicle lean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong or intentionally damaging that person's trying to do to me. They're not coming over being like, I'm going to ruin her day. But I would get so frustrated. And I was just like, why are you bothering me? But when I actually took a step back, I'm like, it's frustrating for me because as someone with ADHD, I have a really hard time with task switching. And so when I'm on a task and I get booted out of that, when my focus is finally on something and now you're re-triggering me out of it, it's really, really difficult for me to come back to that task with the same level of focus. So you haven't just disturbed me for your 2 minutes. It's probably going to take me, another 15, 20 to be able to refocus. But I couldn't communicate that with you if I was just emotional of like, please stop bugging me, because I needed to understand, why is this so triggering to me? Like, why does this really bother me when people do? So that when someone comes to me, I can say, hey, I appreciate, doing this. Do you mind just sending an email next time? Or like, can you come by, at a different time of day? Or if you notice that I'm really focused in on something, can you consider not bothering me? Because it's hard for me to get.
Those are all great advice.
Yeah.
By the way. And I think that really highlights why it's important when we're having these triggered responses at work. Like someone makes me angry. I think when we get angry, instinctively, we just want to lash out at the nearest target and be nasty. And that's tough because if you've got someone, Greg, the cubicle leaner, likes to lean in. Oh, hey, Laura, what are you working on? That's cool. It's not malicious most of the time.
No.
This is just a person looking for a human connection at work.
Yeah.
That's all this person wants. And if you just lash out and go, hey, fuck you, Greg, it's hard to take those words back.
Yeah.
Once you've put out there like, hey, you're bad, I don't like you, I'm mad at you, it's really hard to take that back. But if you pause and come up with a better way of doing it, you can preserve what could be a good relationship with this person and also solve the problem.
And your reputation.
Yeah, because simply lashing out is just going to make things way worse. It's now you've got a guy who you hurt his feelings and he's going to go to the next cubicle and talk about how you're the worst person in the world. And it just makes things worse. And it's worth reflecting. I'm glad you brought up the ADHD. It's one of those things that simultaneously, like, we're working so hard to take down the stigma of things like that. But at the same time, I mean, do you feel like it gets taken seriously in work culture, like that people have ADHD and it's something that might require a little sensitivity or some work?
So it's an interesting time. So I also have major depressive disorder, like clinically diagnosed depressive disorder.
Really? How long have you been struggling with that?
I was diagnosed in 2016. No. Yeah, 2016.
Was it triggered by anything specific, or
I've always been
like a gradual?
Yeah, I've always been exposed to it. It's just a part of my journey that I've always had to navigate. And sometimes it's more difficult than others. And I think when it comes to mental health, though, in the workplace, I'm a tough love kind of person on this, because I'm like, you are in control of your situation and you're the only one that can advocate for yourself, because whether you have the same kind of mental health, or mental illness going on as I do, it's going to be very different for you. Your journey with it is going to be very different. So it's a lot of figuring out what my journey with it looks like. What do I need in a working environment to support me? And then effectively communicating that, instead of being like, oh my gosh, Ryan, like I have A, B, C, D, and you're being so inconsiderate right now. Well, you aren't a mental health professional and you're also not a professional in me. So why would I expect you to be able to accommodate for me if I don't even know what accommodation I need for myself? And so I think when it comes to work, it's more effectively communicating what you need to be able to set yourself up for success, and not necessarily, hey, I have this, take it seriously, because what does that mean?
It's so hard because that's a natural response. What you're saying is probably the response that any reasonable person would have. It's like, listen, I have this mental health issue. I didn't choose it. I don't want it, but it's hard for me. Take it serious. And you're looking at the manager of a freaking KFC and he's like, I'll try, but I don't have the tools. I don't know. Heck, as a lawyer, even I try, but if one of my employees came to me and say, hey, Ryan, I'm depressed. I'm like, okay, that sucks. I'm sorry. But I don't know what to do about that. So it's important we bring that up. What are some things? I mean, you said early on in the show that if we have a boss who's crossing boundaries or failing to support someone, that the employee needs to accept some responsibility for their role in that equation. So what advice do you have for someone who maybe is struggling with depression at work and doesn't feel that they're being taken seriously or have the support that they need?
Figure out what support you need and be specific in it and ask for it. And then if that's not respected and met, then you have a whole other issue. And I always tell managers, you're not there to solve someone's problem. Whatever someone brings to you, you do not need to pretend that you understand and pretend that you have a solution for. A
lot of managers get that wrong. They think they have to have an answer to everything, and it causes them to knee jerk and do the wrong thing.
All you need to do.
Ryan's depressed. Here's some balloons. Like what are you doing?
There is so much. I admire people so much that can say, I don't know, but I'm here to listen. Or a manager that can say, thank you for sharing and allowing yourself to, or thank you for sharing and feeling safe enough to confide in me for that. How can I support you? And then that's where I think obligation is on the employee to be able to communicate effectively what they need at work, because it's challenging, because I know how difficult it is to go through mental health struggles, especially when you're in the depths of depression. It's nearly impossible to even figure out what you need.
And it doesn't go away. It's something.
No, you live with it.
Yeah, it stays with you. And I think I really admire you coming out and saying it, because of all of my friends who I'm inviting on this show, I can't think of many who surpass you in terms of just you project such a healthy relationship with work and how to be, mentally stable in an unstable environment. You really do a good job teaching those things specifically. And I think people might see that and go, well, she has the perfect life. She does meditation and balance. She doesn't know. And it's like, no. Like all of these tools that you're teaching people, it's symptomatic of the pain that you deal with every day. It's absolutely nuts that people would see you offering really good advice and not realize that you too struggle with depression. So is it something that comes, is it ebbs and flows? What does it look like to you when you say, hey, I do struggle with depression? What does that look like? I think for me, my depression and my ADHD go very, very hand in hand. So if let's call it a flare up, if my depression starts to creep back in, then my ADHD gets real bad too. So it's like everything all at once. Feed on each other. Yeah. Okay. But for me, it's, I have a good support network. I know the signs and I also know what to ask for when depression does come back for me. And I think it's also important to realize that
if you have depression, you go through seasons where it's really, really tough. And then you have seasons where you're like, I don't feel depressed anymore. But it's really important to remember that it's just a piece of your story that's going to come up again in the future. So how can you best support yourself now to set yourself up for success when it comes up again? Because it will. It absolutely will. And so for me, it was just, I struggled for years not knowing, and I don't want to make it sound easy of like, I just knew from day one no, I had years that it was awful. And now I've kind of built this support network of, I know what I need to ask for help. I know what I struggle with ADHD because it's very different for everyone. Yeah. I know how depression impacts my work. I know how it impacts my day-to-day life and what I'm going to need during those times.
You have a long relationship with it. So you've learned some of the warning signs. Well, let me just take a minute. I'm not a mental health professional. You're not either. We're just two people, talking about problems that everyone deals with every day. This isn't medical advice. This isn't clinical. Yeah. We're not advocating.
The lawyer in you coming
out. Yeah. Disclaimer. No, but that said, when do you have a sense that, hey, I'm having a flare up with my depression? Are there sort of telltale flags that you look for?
My motivation starts to drop. It gets really hard to do the things I enjoy on a day to day.
What does low motivation look like?
Getting out of bed.
Just getting
showering,
out of bed. And it's different than just being tired.
It's so different.
How is it different?
I had my 8 hours of sleep and physically, I'm rested, but mentally I am exhausted. I am so tired of just existing. Like day-to-day life and existing is exhausting.
Really?
When depression comes up.
Do you find dread or anxiety creep back in also, or is it mostly an exhaustion thing? Like when do you realize, I'm really in trouble here?
It's mostly the exhaustion. I don't struggle much with anxiety, guilt. I've kind of navigated that over the years. It's more of just, oh no, it's coming back. And immediately I'll communicate that with the people it impacts most in my life. And so, that's my partner living with him.
You don't have to, note real names if you don't want to, but who's your first person you go to?
My partner.
When you realize, okay.
Yeah, living together. I think I show up differently in day-to-day life when I'm struggling. And so for me, it's really important to communicate, hey, I'm struggling today and I'm having a hard time. And I think the depression or the ADHD or whatever it is, it's coming back. And I'll try to get specific of I'm struggling with this, or like I'm having a really hard time with my motivation. And I have an amazingly supportive partner that says, okay, I know I'm going to have to need to pick up a little bit of the slack today or whatever you need. But also he is incredible at just being like, and how can I support you today?
That's amazing. I really hope to meet this guy one day.
He's great.
Do you feel guilty coming to your partner and saying, hey, I need you? Why not?
Because we're a team. We're always on the same team. And I think that's important to remember in relationships is we will both show up differently every different day, throughout our relationship. But one thing that will always stay true is we're always on the same team.
People are afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I'm really glad you have this team mentality, because part of the reason people don't ask for help is they feel guilty. They don't want to be a burden on other people. And this is a personal story for me. I'm not clinically depressed or anything like that. I don't struggle that way, and I don't pretend I do, but I did have a period of my life where things went very badly for me. I had left the fire service. I applied to, I think, 13 law schools, and I got 0 acceptances. And that put me on like a 2-ish year detour where, oh my God, it was dark. And I felt like a failure. I felt like a loser. I felt like I'd given up a dream job for a pipe dream that never turned out, and that I had reached too far. And I thought, well, I got rejected from all these law schools because I don't deserve to be a lawyer. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. And now I don't have the fire service either. I've lost everything. And I remember I really went into a dark place, and I really could have used support. And there were people in my life who did try to support me, but I was just spiraling. And I remember it was really hard to find a supportive network in that time. When you first realized, hey, I'm diagnosed with depression. Yeah. Did you have a network in place already, or did you find you had to go on a bit of a building journey?
I had to build from the ground up. I had to figure out what supported me. That was kind of the start of my yoga meditation journey.
Oh, it started with the depression
around the
diagnosis?
Same time.
Really?
Yeah, it was more of a journey of when I got diagnosed. It kind of threw me for a loop that looking back now, I'm like, this isn't something that I just got in 2016. It had always been there. But it was kind of a wake up call for me to be like, I need to get to know myself a little better. I really have no idea who I am. And so it kind of turned my journey inward of like, let's figure out who the hell you are. And then we can build from there, because at this point, you don't even know yourself good enough to know what's going to support you.
There's a stigma that questions like that you're asking there are self-indulgent in some way. I remember those articles that used to come out like 10 years ago, say, oh, millennials are the most self-obsessed generation. It's not self-obsession, it's self-reflection. And reflection is so different.
Yeah.
Because if kind of a rough example, but let's say you have a race car. If you do not know how that race car works, if you don't have the manual, if you've never looked under the hood, how the hell are you going to get the best performance out of that race car? And humans are no different. If you don't know what causes you to push people away in your life, I mean, I think that when I experienced a brief moment of depression, at least that's what it felt like, I couldn't stop myself. I just pushed people away.
Yeah.
I just retreated inward. I pushed my family away.
Yeah.
I pushed my friends away. I lost a lot of friends in that episode. And I think it's because I never took a minute to self-reflect. So when you went on that journey, what was the first thing you realized that you had to change to start building a supportive network?
My lifestyle. At that point in life, I didn't know what I needed just on like a physical level to support my body. I was eating things that did not make me feel good. I was drinking a lot at the time. I was spending my days doing things that didn't serve me, things I didn't enjoy that I just assume, well, I'm
like what? Do you remember?
Going to parties, drinking, staying out till 3 a.m. Like things that I'm like, I felt like I was supposed to enjoy because I was in university, but I never enjoyed, but I didn't even give myself the space or grace or confidence to say, I actually don't like that. So I'm not going to spend my time doing things that I think I'm supposed to enjoy if I really don't enjoy them at all.
Did you feel like an outsider in some of those parties?
I still do.
Really?
And I think that's, a lot about being neurodivergent is you always feel like a little bit of an outsider. You feel different. Even when I was, starting my career, I would do things differently. But I was met with support and people that saw that as kind of a superpower.
Yeah.
And let me kind of run with things in a controlled way. And now I'm like, I will always feel, I think, a little bit different than a lot of people that I surround myself with. But I'm okay with that because being different is also my superpower, and it's what's brought me to where I am now.
It really is. And it attracts people to you, I think. If you're so focused on, I want to be in, I'm going to go to all the parties and be part of the crowd. I mean, I'll blend in if you want, but that's not going to attract the kind of people who you want in your life to you. I'm not saying that like, oh, if you go to the bars, it's bad people. There's great people at bars. There's great people at parties. But if you're like, who's the person I can call when I need a friend?
Yeah.
You're not going to do that just by doing the things that you think everyone else is doing. Be a little weird, because the friend who's going to be most supportive to you is going to be the person who likes playing Dungeons and Dragons with you on Saturday night. You've got this connection. You can be your true selves around each other. It's so important to be a little weird.
Yeah.
And not even weird, just be yourself.
Just be yourself.
And that's worked out great for you because you have this big following. And I don't want to finish this podcast without talking about the Work Bestie retreats.
Yes.
I think those are awesome.
Yes.
For those who don't know, what are these retreats that you do?
Yeah. So it's group travel essentially. And it sounds so wild, but my followers sign up and we travel together, and we have full itineraries planned for us. We meet in different parts of the world and we just travel. We take time away from work. We reconnect some of them. I teach more like retreat style yoga, meditation, and all that. And so it's kind of a time for people to meet like-minded people to them. A lot of people come solo, which is terrifying when you think about it.
Can we take a minute to appreciate how much guts that takes?
Fly across the world.
I'm going to go meet this celebrity who I've been following forever. I'm going to meet a bunch of strangers. I'm going to go by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And people meet friends that they see well after the trips are done. We experience new cultures together. It's funny, the first day or two, you'll always hear people of, oh, I got so many emails last night or work this.
This happens every time?
Every time. By the end, not a single person's talking about work. It's hard for people to disconnect. But by the end, people are like, wait, what was my job again? I have to go back. Okay, this is what I do for work.
Do you find people have trouble connecting initially without talking about work? Like, is it almost like, hey, you can't talk about work? And they go, well, what the hell?
They can talk about work. I don't care. Yeah, I don't care if people talk about work.
There's no rules when they come.
Absolutely no. It's show up as you are, whatever you want. If you want to pull your laptop out and send emails, you can do that. I don't care. You exist how you want to exist. Your time off is however you want to spend it. But I think that we in society, one of the first questions we ask people or how we introduce ourselves is, what do you do for work? It's like, who cares?
It is truly the first thing we ask.
Because it's how a lot of people define themselves. They tie their identity to it. So it's, hi, I'm Laura and I do this is for work. Or you ask, tell me about yourself. I'm a lawyer. It's like, cool. Tell me about yourself. Like who are you? What do you enjoy? What are your passions? And a lot of people struggle to introduce themselves. If you went up to someone and you're like, tell me about yourself, and you can't tell me about what you do for work, a lot of people would be like, okay, it's hard for people to answer, right? When you can't, you have to associate your identity with something that's tied to you and not the external labels and things outside of yourself that you kind of do. And people always push back and they're like, yeah, but I think what you do for work defines you. And I'm like, well, I think how you show up for work defines you. I don't think what you do for work defines you.
That's a really good point. I stopped introducing myself as a lawyer a long time ago. I mean, I don't know if I'm cheating, but people say, oh, what do you do? I get that all the time. And I'd say I'm a workers' rights advocate, because that to me is really what it's about. It's not about like filing the motions and going to court and arguing. At the end of the day, for me, what I like about what I do is that I take people who are just trying to make a living and don't have a lot of power compared to a big corporation. And I try to balance the scales. That's what I do. And that's what's important to me. First of all, is that an acceptable answer at one of these retreats? I didn't say lawyer.
What was the question?
What do you do?
That's acceptable to what do you do?
What's your answer to that question?
What do I do? Well, if you're talking about like a work capacity, I'd probably say, I create content, I connect to people, I build community. But if you're asking me like, what do you do in life? That's not part of.
Well, the retreats and the yoga are fantastic.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Laura, I really appreciate you coming out here all the way to San Diego. I'm sorry we lost the sun. I don't know where we put it. And I hope we find it before you leave. But thank you for coming out. I do want to wrap up with just a couple of your quick thoughts on a couple of things.
Yeah.
What ultimately, if someone says to you, I want to be successful, can you boil down, I know it's unique to every person, but boil down what success really looks like to you?
My definition of success? Well, if someone asked me that, I would say define success. I don't think you can ask someone, how do I be successful, if you don't know what their definition of success is. Because if you came to me and my definition of success is to make $100,000, I'd be like, great. All right. How we can get there is let's look at whatever credentials you have. Let's look at jobs you can apply for. Let's see kind of what fits in that bucket. But if you came to me and you're like, how can I be successful? And your definition of success is having a work-life balance where you're able to spend time with your loved ones and build a network, and then it's a whole different conversation we're having.
Absolutely.
So Laura, I'm so bad at answering these questions.
It's tough because I think you did the right thing where, people say, I want to be successful. Tell me how to be successful, or tell me what is the definition of success. It really is a personal journey that we go on. And I can't tell you how much I connected with Donna Sue. I really like her because she's not a CEO. She's not a billionaire, but I look at that character on your reels and I think, in my opinion, she's the most successful character there. She's a self-assured person. She is comfortable in her skin. She knows who she wants to connect with at work, who she wants to coach, and who she needs to avoid. She values her inner peace and she knows how to protect it. That's a successful person.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think we should all try to be a little bit like her. But Laura, thank you so much for coming out. I'll see you at dinner tonight. Okay.
Yeah. See you then.
Right on.